video colloquium of the project Colloquium European Societies in Digital Age. We're dealing with the challenges of digital societies from a European perspective, and one of the formats is a video colloquium. That means we put together people interested in a special topic from different European countries, and we create a communication space where cross borders and cross discussion bubbles where people can talk to each other who maybe wouldn't have talked together before. This is Sabrina Davids, Law Media Institute, and I'm setting up that project with the Gustav Stresemann Institute. My colleague Michael Münz is sitting there, and with the EU Commission and also with the Bundeszentrale für politische Bildung. Now, as we are looking for topics that are really important for digital societies Europe-wide, we choose as first topic copyright, because copyright is a real hotly debated and very deep, important issue. And so we invited to our first video colloquium Mr. Axel Voss, who is a member of the European Parliament and deeply linked to the new copyright proposition, and also female speakers, because everyone we asked couldn't make it. So at least we can say that our participants of the discussion now have at least one thing in common, and that is their gender. So I hope we will have a respectful discussion, because that is what we try to do with the colloquium, to create respectful discussion, conversation settings where people can meet and talk. So I would beg you to talk as if you had, as if to friends who have different opinions. So for the first, I would like to maybe introduce yourself to our to the people who are watching the video now and later, and also, yes, I'm looking forward to what we are discussing. Maybe we start with Mr. Axel Voss, please.
So thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Axel Voss. Now, Alek, would you like to introduce yourself and also why you are connected to copyright?
So my name is Alek Tarkowski. I'm the president of a Polish foundation called Centrum Cyfrowe. We're a digital think and do tank working on a range of digital issues related to openness, civic participation, and engagement. I'm also affiliated with Comunia, which is a European association on the digital public domain, which has been involved in the whole copyright reform process. Finally, for 15 years, I have been a member of Creative Commons, which is an international network of organizations, individuals looking for flexible solutions to user rights, but also to rights of creators, to find ways of sharing content. So I have a deep interest in how European copyright law and copyright system is built, and how we can use it to further mutual but varied perspectives and goals.
Okay, thank you, Alek. Bozhanov, would you like to present yourself?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I'm a software engineer and architect, currently a digital entrepreneur. I was previously advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister of Bulgaria for that. And also, I'm quite interested, and I've been following the copyright debate for a while now, and I'm generally a transparency and openness advocate. And I've been speaking to conferences in Europe.
Okay, thank you. So let's start the discussion. And I think it's important maybe not to look back too much on what has happened, what should have happened otherwise. Or not. Maybe we can just look forward and see what will happen from now. Maybe we start with the process. Mr. Axel, would you like to explain what are the next steps of the trial and where are the points where people or institutions with other perspectives could involve themselves on their perspective?
Mm-hmm. So now we have reached the level of legislative process where we are starting now the so-called trilogue. And this is now the negotiation with the Council and the common approach on this, and also the Commission, what they have proposed, and our text now from the European Parliament. This may change everything again, but of course, because of the process in the Parliament, I'm more than less obliged to this, what we have decided now in the Parliament last week. And because the mandate was before the summertime has been rejected, because of a massive campaigning against upload filtering, censorship machines, and everything like this. And now we have reached a proposal or a common position of the European Parliament where we are saying, so we are not mentioning these measures any longer because it seems quite hard to get a majority if they are inside the text. That's why we are but just saying clearly the platforms have a responsibility or liability for this. And this is creating now again practical problems, what we would have had from the beginning already. But so we like to continue or to start with these negotiations as soon as possible, and we hope we can have or can come to an end of the negotiations.
Very highly controversial, discussed topic, copyright, but I think it's important not to look too much back what has happened, what should have been otherwise. I would like us to look forward and what will the next steps be. So, Mr. Axel Voss, I would beg you to explain maybe what the next steps are in the future process of the copyright proposition and how this will go on with a trialogue and where people with different opinions or institutions will have approaches could maybe perspectives.
So thanks for the question. So we achieved last week in the European Parliament a common position of the Parliament, and now we have to compare and to negotiate with Council and Commission the next, hopefully only 3 months, for coming up with a common position of a European legislator. And therefore, of course, we have to look at the common position of the Council and the proposal of the Commission and then the common position of the Parliament. And then we are trying to find one final wording for all what is now at stake and on the table. And that's why we are trying to achieve this till the mid of December and then hopefully coming to plenary in February. So this is the idea. I know we haven't achieved our deadlines before, but I hope we can achieve this now. So from the content, of course, we will have some difficulties. If I'm looking to Article 11, we have the Commission proposal with a very strict right on this, and we have on the other side the very wide exception from the council, and we have in the middle somehow the parliament. And now we have to find a way. If we are coming to Article 13, we can't ignore what has happened before the summertime. This because I would say the internet community was misled by the big platforms in saying, oh, we are destroying the internet and censorship machines and upload filters and blah, blah, blah. And so at first, probably I should, and I will explain, nobody is interested in destroying the internet. Nobody is interested in filtering and in blocking and in censorship machines. But we have to find a way how we can assure that copyright was still in the legal text and existing law, how we can transfer this into this internet world, and especially to those business models who are saying to the users, please upload your content, whatever you would like to have. And of course, we have seen massively copyright infringements, and that's why we are thinking as a European legislator, it's now time to try to bring the copyright holders on eye level to the platforms, and to make sure that this massively infringing of copyright is not taking place any longer in such an extent. And so, of course, we won't achieve 100% here and 100% from the other side, and so this won't be possible, but we have to be sure that this, and this is what we are asking for as a parliament, is nothing less and nothing more that what is already existing should be respected also by the business models in the internet. And also the interpretation of the courts who are saying active copyright infringing platforms are liable. And this is what we are just saying very clearly. And so, of course, then we have to consider how can they practically manage the liability in a way that they can also, they are not liable at everything or for everything what is uploaded on this platform. But so far, the campaign before the summer break has been just on this upload filtering. What we have done now is, as a parliament, in saying we are not taking this on board any longer, but we are still saying very clearly platforms, copyright infringing platforms are liable. And what we are trying then now to initiate is a kind of a dialogue under the leadership of the Commission and the member states, if they want to, and trying to find practical solutions for managing this liability on internet platforms. And therefore we need these stakeholders, so the right holder on the one hand side and the platforms on the other hand side. And so far the platforms has been very quiet and misleading the whole discussion in one direction, where we, because of majority and the public, we are now coming to a solution and saying we don't take this on board any longer. And even if we're coming to all these content ID systems, we have to be aware that this is existing already, and this is not destroying the internet, and this has not led to an outcry already in such a way.
Okay, thank you. I think maybe it's not a question of whether the internet, whether it is intended to destroy the internet. I think the controversies maybe are this could to this. Maybe Bozhidar Bozhanov, you have an alternative to what is not called upload filter. Would you like to explain what your approach towards the problems that I think all sides see? I think every side knows we have to change copyright and to save remuneration for creatives. So what is your proposition, Bozhidar?
Well, thank you. My proposal was a more technical one, and the feasibility of it is has to be assessed, because we can't be sure by just having an idea floating around whether it's feasible or not. But it was about the platforms mandatorily providing API, that is a technical term, to all content, to all right holders, where they could themselves assess which is the infringing content and which is not. So in a way to automate the notice and takedown procedures. And this wouldn't be effectively an upload filter, as the community has feared, because it will not be taken before it's actually uploaded or appears, but still the right holders would have the option to inspect themselves without even relying on the platforms to do the content recognition. This would solve also some other types of problems. For example, currently not all platforms have all the content available to match it to uploaded works. So yeah, YouTube and so Spotify do have all the works available, so that they can match them using content recognition. But smaller ones and competitors, let's say, don't. And right holders don't often provide them with that content. So even if they wanted to, they wouldn't have been able to do the filtering or content recognition or trying to evade this liability. So this was in a nutshell the proposal. It has to be very well assessed, but this is actually my concern in question, because currently a text has been adopted, which indeed has dropped some of the more controversial words, but shouldn't we have the technical, at least idea how to approach that problem before putting things in legislation? I mean, if we are now further on going to discuss how this is going to be implemented, isn't it a bit, shouldn't the process be the other way around? Shouldn't we have an idea of how to actually implement that in practical terms, and as Mr. Voss rightfully said, before doing the legislative process, rather than legislating and then figuring out how to actually would be able to do it?
Okay, thank you, Peter. So maybe the problem is also, yes, thank you, Bozhidar. Maybe the question is whether we have technical solutions before uploading or after uploading. That seems to be a question. And also what happens with the digital space and who decides what can become visible or not. Alek, do you have, from your point of perspective, Tarkowski, something to add?
Apologies, I was muted. I would like to make 3 points. First is a general one, and I'm happy to focus our discussion, for instance, on Article 13. But let's remember the directive has 20 articles and has concerned many other issues. And the part that's for us at Comunia really important is user rights as expressed with exceptions and limitations. Thankfully, on one hand, this has not been an issue that antagonizes people. This is an issue that seems it's easier to reach compromise, but nevertheless, in the final vote, several ideas for exceptions, which seem to be not extremely controversial, like freedom of panorama, which has been discussed for years, promoted by civil society, for instance, in the shape of the Wikimedia community, it was simply struck down. And this is what troubles me, and I think we should have this broader conversation. Why, if we look at the vote, across the vote, things that moved forward this idea of flexibility, exceptions, users' rights were not adopted, and things that strengthened copyright were adopted. For this reason, I think it's slowly hard to use the term balance. It's been the goal of the Commission to find the balance. I think everyone finds balance in a different point. And personally, I think it's maybe a better idea to think what's the vision behind the copyright reform. The way I see it right now, the reform very strongly simply is a vote in favor of strengthening the creative sector in Europe. And I think we just need to acknowledge it. This is what, in my opinion, the Parliament said. We are supporting the creative sector. But to make a more specific comment on the filters, indeed, it would really help us to understand what is the technical solution that will fit into the legal solution. There seems to be something missing there. I'm very happy we're no longer talking about filters. I think this proves that sort of the civil society, the citizens' voices were important because they did make a difference, because we were talking about filters, the language on technical measures was present there, it's not present anymore. So from my perspective, we sort of agreed to move away from that. But the question is, so what do we put there in return? And maybe this is the discussion we need to have, because I think a lot of people need to be assured, yes, this will not be filtered. I would like to point out that I agree that a lot has changed with regard to platforms over the almost 20 years since the former rules, or 15 years, were adopted. But at the same time, and it's a good idea to ask the question, how do they become liable? But it's also a question, aren't we privatizing how copyright is enforced? And is this a good idea where, in effect, we'll be putting power in the hands of the platforms? The way I see it right now, a lot will depend on how platforms negotiate issues with the rights holders. And this is my final point. And Mr. Voss has said there are sort of two sides, platforms and right holders. I will insist there is a third part, and these are users, not commercial users, but individuals. We can also call them citizens. And I'm very troubled by portraying them as people who are basically only a force or some kind of a mob that can be misinformed and steered. I believe the discussion, and maybe we can discuss about it, there's a lot of things that are not good about the online debate we've been having. It's extremely polarized, I think, on all sides. But I think we need to acknowledge that individuals do exist, and there are also organizations. I think Wikipedia is a very important one that really, in Europe and also in Germany, where you are based, has very strong legitimacy, I think, to speak about this. I was wondering whether I haven't lost the connection, but I think everything is fine. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Alek Tarkowski. And I think what you said is an important point, also maybe also an important aspect of misunderstandings, that you didn't talk of campaigning. You said the civic society was worried, and maybe that would be good to see that in digital times there's not only platforms and right holders, and there are also no users, consumers, and creatives are mixed. Yeah, there's a third party, as you said, Alek, also. So I would like to ask all of you, and first you, Mr. Axel Voss. So if we assume that there's a digital culture and a digital civic society beyond platforms, beyond economic interests, which I think we have to foster for a resilient digital society. So what can we all do to foster digital culture beyond economic interests? So I think that's a bit also what every side wants, that it's not only driven by economic interests, but also of common good.
So, if at first cooperation from every side would be wonderful, and I mean this not in threatening, in blaming and shaming and whatever it is, and what I'm experience now a lot. And cooperation hasn't been there so far, from my point of view. The legislative term and all the deadlines we have, I'm forced to present again and again something. And if I'm experienced only the situation that this can't be the case, and we don't like this, and this not, and this I don't consider as a kind of a cooperation. And we have a problem here And everyone has to be aware that he's not getting 100%. The right holders not, the platforms not, the user. And therefore we have to exchange views, we have to come forward with a legal text, and that's why we are doing this. And now, but I'm facing only the situation where campaign starts and not delivering solutions. So at first, the user of this reform isn't affected at all. He can do everything, and even the user, we are taking away the liability of the user in uploading copyright protected works and transferring these to the platforms. For the first time, if we are looking concrete to the copyright law so far, the user who is infringing the copyright is liable. And this is what we are doing, the kind of a gift for the user, and saying, if you are uploading copyright protected works to a platform who is active and more than less communicating to the public, they will be liable, and if they are licensing, then this liability of the consumer is also covered. So the user isn't at all affected, especially, but if we are coming to these practical problems, and we have faced these problems also regarding the so-called memes or remixes or whatever it is, the changing of the original copyright protected works. Yes, we are coming here to a problem, and again, we won't achieve 100% the solution for everyone, so that we have to start with something in saying, yes, copyright now under pressure has to be on eye level also with the digital world somehow, but then once again, just ignoring this problem and saying we don't like everything what's now in place and what we are thinking about, etc., etc., this is not leading to a solution. And therefore I'm asking myself, even Mr. Wales from Wikipedia, then before the summertime, closed his website in saying we don't want all this filtering, but he was more than less excluded of all these, of Article 30. And this is what I'm saying is misleading the information in the public. And then, of course, this I was very in favor of this, and he's saying, but still we have a problem, we have to think about the summertime. And then I don't know if he has tried, but there so far is not one idea in coming forward for solving this problem. And that's why we have to find solutions somewhere on a legal way. And if nobody is coming up with a proper solutions and only naming everything what might be a kind of a technical solution and interpreting these as this is a filter, this is an upload blocker, this is a kind of censorship machines, then we won't achieve a perfect result at the end. If everyone is just going to the public and saying, no, 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 we don't. So that's for, I'm asking for solutions. We are open for solutions. And if you are the experts, then you are very much welcome in coming forward. But it's not an option in saying we are kicking out copyright law, the whole copyright law. This is not what the legislator is intending. What we are asking for is please respect the right of the right holders. That's what we are doing. And how this is interpreted by the court. If I come also to this subject, because it was mentioned, freedom of panorama. Yes, I'm totally convinced in this digital world we should have common rules in place on everything what might affect the digital market. But if we are then of the member states, they are defending in this sector their traditions, their national laws till the end. So if we are coming now to freedom of panorama and trying to regulate this on a European level, if you're looking to the political reality with the member states, they won't go for this. And that's why we are saying, if we are then again coming out with a kind of a solution and common solution on freedom of panorama, but failing with the council on this, then we have another reason. It's then not only 11, it's not only 13, it's not only 3, it's not only 14, it's not only 12, so the articles who are creating kind of enemies of all these legislative process. Then we would have also a kind of a other part of the political or of the European legislator who won't be in favor of this and will vote against. So we are not coming, if we are taking everything on board, what might be a wise solution, because the other side won't have a kind of a reaction on that. They are insisting on their national traditions, and this you can, of course, criticize, that they are not open enough for the digital single.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Voss, I'm glad to hear that digital civic society institutions are invited to find a solution for everyone, and I appreciate this. And as we are now coming from training to I wanted to ask you, Alek and Bozhidar, how can we this if we don't make it like suggested, or if you want to have change? Please, Bozhidar.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to add a few more points before going to your question directly. First, as we see even from this conversation, technical difficulties are something that we should not ignore. And even current technology, the content ID that YouTube is providing, it's very far from perfect. It has a lot of false positives. It has a lot of exceptions and limitations that it can't take into account, among other reasons, because they're not unified in Europe. Different countries have different exceptions and limitations. Maybe a future copyright reform could unify also those, but then again, Mr. Voss is very right that each country has its own tradition and culture, etc. And here I want to make a very, very important point, that I believe that the MEPs and Mr. Voss himself are not trying to sabotage the internet. We are sure that you have good intentions. The thing is, the devil is in the detail, and some seemingly small changes to a legal text could lead to a butterfly effect of sorts. And this is why we have to indeed discuss how exactly this is going to be achieved. But I would like to have a clear solution, as you said, before this even goes to a trialogue, or if this goes before the final plenary, because otherwise we'll vote something that then the courts will have to interpret with the current technological perspective how this is going to work. And how with the current technology available, this is the way this is going to work, I think, is that platforms will just make their algorithms even stricter, and they will not just ban uploads. For a case from the other day, Sony claimed ownership of Bach pieces because some pianist had played them. And I know there are a lot of these examples. They might be a small percentage, they might be a big percentage. And this leads me to the next question. What is the data available currently to actually base this reform on? Because you mentioned that there is a massive copyright infringement from the platforms. How massive is it? What is the loss of the copyright industry? Do these money actually exist? This is actually a more fundamental question for the internet economy in general. we could shift the balance a little bit towards copyright. I would be fine with that. But do this money exist? Can you pay for that with advertising money? Spotify, for example, European company, is operating on a loss. This could be because of many reasons, but if they have to pay even more to artists, can they stay afloat? Maybe this internet model of video streaming and audio streaming is broken entirely. We don't know. But have all these things been taken into account, or we're just trying to go through a very, indeed, complicated European legislative process? And here I agree with Mr. Voss that it is not that trivial. Naming people and blaming them doesn't help, because the legislative process in Europe is very democratic and very complicated for that reason. But all of these things, the data, the current technical measures, the opinion of all sides, at least from what I've seen, hasn't been taken into account and hasn't been included in what the proposal of the Commission initially was, and then was discussed in Parliament. And then back to the particular solutions. No single person obviously can give you a perfect solution. I actually tried before the July vote. I emailed my article to all of the MEPs. I got replies from 3 of them, I believe. So I'm absolutely open to discussing the practical solution. We should sit on the same table with the platforms, ask them, would this or that solution work for you? Ask the copyright industry, would you be able to support some additional infrastructure to handle the, for example, content recognition yourself, or do you want that to be outsourced to the big platforms? All of these things, all of these variables and parameters, we should take into account. And I think we should take them into account before going to a final plenary, because that would mean we are possibly creating chaos. Possibly courts will resolve things and things will fall into place, but we are introducing unnecessary risks, I believe. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bozhidar Bozhanov. Yeah, how do we, Alek, what is your opinion?
I would like to follow up on Bozhidar's comment about the need to discuss solutions, and would like for a second to sort of step away from the reality of the political process, which of course I acknowledge. I acknowledge how the EU Parliament process works. But if we think about it sort of in objective terms, we had a moment where there was 1 week, so 5 working days, in which the MEPs presented a range of solutions. And by the way, I'm here a bit surprised, Mr. Voss, that you speak only about criticism, but because actually, for instance, in Article 13, there was a range of alternatives. But so we have these solutions, and there was something akin to what Mr. Bozhidar suggested, the idea of an API, direct access, which maybe simplify some things. There was an idea to use other legal solutions than those that prescribe sort of this idea potentially of content filtering. And there was really no, I couldn't see any on substance debate of it. I think everyone would agree this requires some kind of, let's say, colloquium or conference or opinion by experts. And instead it was just several days, some political debate and vote. So maybe we need some process, I don't know, alongside where this happens. But I'm a social scientist, so I see 2 social issues here. One issue is with the representation of users. I think we need to acknowledge that it's very hard to answer the question, who represents users? There's no association of internet users. And I think maybe this is the reason why it feels like the users are not there, or maybe they are misrepresented. I think in the long term, we need to find a way to bring these users to the table. And of course, they cannot come as a block of emails sent from home. We need to find some way to put them in this discussion, because otherwise it will be platforms and creators talking, and users will be somewhere on the side, at worst, sending angry tweets. And that relates to the second point. I think we will all agree that there was a lot of confusion around the participation of citizens in this legislative process. They're basically the only simple means available. Let's simplify it to an email. It can also be a telephone. We've seen in radical cases was compared to denial of service attacks, and that I think is, you know, not wanting to have deliberation, but we will acknowledge there's some problem if emails boxes are flooded by emails. But to me, this suggests this process itself is broken. We need to look for some solutions where citizens and MEPs have a conversation that doesn't flood mailboxes, doesn't lead to suggestions this is automated. I think there's a lot of tools today to prove identity, to create deliberation online, and interesting things. Even EU is developing, for instance, in its Horizon 2020 program, that if only we apply to the political, the participatory process, maybe we would have more deliberation of the sort we're having now, instead of I agree angry tweets, which don't help.
Thank you. That's an interesting point. Include digital civic society, also called as users or creators online or meme writers. How can we include digital civic society in the process of solution finding? That would be one question which I hand over first to Mr. Axel Voss. And also maybe the question, who decides, who owns public digital space? So who do we want to decide what is visible? Please.
So at first, I would like to remind everyone that we are 2 years already dealing with this reform of copyright. And coming up in the very last minute and saying, oh, this is only upload filtering and we don't like, is not the right way in participate in a kind of a legislative process. Mm-hmm. So then once again, this is a question of business model and of copyright holders. Of course, the user might be affected if we are coming to these memes, that their contribution and their upload might be affected by one of these measures. But the interest or the question, legally speaking, the legitimacy of a meme has nothing to do with more a kind of a practical question, how we can make sure that technical solutions might also recognize an exception, legitimate, the created, and then be uploaded. I'm not sure how the user will now bring in, so of course they can, if they want, if they are interested, they can do. They have a lot of NGOs running around in Brussels and have the freedom of contacting every single member in bringing forward their ideas. There is the possibility, and so I don't know why it seems so that we have hindered the user to participate in this process. This is not the case. And I'm not sure if everyone is also aware that we have different interests of all these different branches of copyright. So the audiovisual industry and the audiobooks, they decided as the that their property shouldn't go at all to a platform. And how you will make sure that this from the beginning is not the case. And so they decided, because they own this right, and saying we would like to distribute films and books or audiobooks in a different way. And there shouldn't be a way in uploading something like this. And would you consider this is a kind of an old-fashioned law and saying, oh no, you're not the right holder, or you're not, this is not your property any longer because I can upload this to a platform? Or would you consider, no, he's the owner, he's the right holder, and he has the right to decide this shouldn't be uploaded? And then you're coming with a business model and saying to your users, you can upload whatever you like to, and then not saying, oh, but if there is someone else and saying, no, I don't want to be my property uploaded to a platform, then this should be just ignored because the possibility of other distribution is there. So then we are coming to this process of notice and take down. If we are extending the e-commerce directive, and this proposal has been on the table, to a kind of a notice and stay down, at first we have again filters at the end, and secondly, we would implement legally a kind of a copyright infringement for the first upload, and then saying, oh, and have nothing in place for damaging or compensation or whatever. So then again, you have to go to court or whatever and interpret all these. So what we have tried, and I'm not sure if everyone is aware of these, in Article 2 with this definition, and this might be improved, and I'm very open for improving these, but we have a definition of all platforms who might be affected by Article 13. And from my personal impression, this affects only a few. So 1% of internet platforms, whatever. What the campaigning is doing is saying, oh, every platform in the internet will be affected. So not even small platforms now affected any longer. We took out micro and small business. And we are just concentrating on big platforms who have significant protected works on their platforms. And then I'm asking myself, why even those platforms should not be liable? The court already decided this in a way in saying active platforms who are infringing copyright are liable. And this is nothing else what we are asking for. And so narrowing down the definition on the platforms who might be affected by Article 13 is already in, this is what we have done in Article 2. And then I'm asking myself, if we are singling out these active platforms, why we don't have a liability in place where they have then to license to all these copyright protected works. They know that the business model is created like this, that copyright protected works can be uploaded. And then I'm asking really myself, why should they think they are not liable? And what is the reason, therefore, we are then would extend, if we are coming to this notice and stay down proceeding, why we would extend the infringing of copyright also for active platforms. I can't see a reason for this, and this would create a kind of a loophole for copyright, and that's why we are looking for these solutions. If you have a wonderful idea for this definition in Article 2, you're very welcome to send this to me, but the liability question for active platforms should be not in question.
Okay, thank you. So maybe Bozhidar, you have a reply to that. Who owns public space? No.
Yeah.
And who decides? Who decides?
Yeah.
So at first we have already laws in place who are giving rights to specific situations. So you can't now socialize everything because it's the internet. We have to have rules, or we have rules in place, and now this is you're referring to is what you are owning already in the offline world. Is this still the same in the online world? And if we have values, then we are asking, are our values still correct? And so if you would like to change the definition of property, then we are coming in another problem and another situation. But I'm not sure. This is also a question now, is the definition of property still acceptable in a digital world? We have this law and the right for everyone already in place. So then we have to discuss, is copyright still a kind of a modern piece of legislation?
Okay, thanks. No, it was a misunderstanding. I didn't mean that copyright holders are not copyright holders when they go into internet. It was who decides what is uploaded or not. So that was what I thought. Because if a platform decides what is potentially copyright infringing or not, and they put it down, so they decide after economic interests and not whether the public digital space is, whether it's maybe not. But Bozhidar, please.
Yeah, well,
it's your turn. Bulgaria calling.
Thank you. The question of liability is indeed a very good, and that's the complex core of the issue. Because yes, obviously, if you are infringing copyright, you should be liable. However, because of the huge volume of uploads that these platforms are facing, obviously they cannot manually monitor all of these uploads. And they have basically two options. One is automate that process through algorithms, through content recognition, through all of these things, or disallow users from uploading content, because that would make them liable without them knowing that it has happened. There could possibly be a middle ground between these two extremes, and I think this is what we're trying to find. But if we say that, okay, 100% you should be liable for anything that appears there, even though if you didn't have the technical opportunities to even know that it's there, which is the premise of the e-commerce directive, then the platforms might end up just shutting down uploads from unverified users, for example, and just having just trusted users, which is an approach. I mean, we have the ADAS regulation in the EU, by which you can prove your identity online. So European uploaders could be forced to prove their identity to YouTube. Whether that's a good idea or not, I don't have an opinion. But then again, I want to focus on transparency again, because I don't think we have enough data. And from what I've heard from Google, I agree, but it's still that 98% of right holders choose not to have their content removed. They choose to monetize it, to just get the money that the video has generated. So if this is a correct figure, which we don't know, but if it's a correct figure, are we solving the right problem? Don't we want to just legislate that the right holders should get all the money that the piece has generated even prior to it being recognized as owned by them? So someone uploads a video, the platforms withhold the money for a certain period, then it gets recognized as copyright infringing, and then the right holder gets all the money even prior to the work being recognized as infringing. And that's an option. But we need more data for that. I think what we should first and foremost do is impose more transparency on the platforms, because they can report some data right now if they wish. Some might not. And we don't have an informed debate and decisions if we don't have enough data from them and from the right holders. And I think it could have been even a two-step reform. First, regulate transparency, then make decisions, then regulate reliability. Obviously, it's a very complicated process, and we can't quickly get through that. But it's a thing to think about. And finally, a very provocative thing that I heard yesterday from a libertarian friend, and I don't necessarily agree with that. But he said, well, copyrighted works are not scarce. So are they really property if there is no scarcity? I'm not saying I agree with that. It's just a philosophical point that we could think about.
Okay, thank you. Now back to Poland, please, Alek.
And I would like to address the issue of public space, because it really interests me. So apologies, I will not continue this discussion about liability, though I find it important. And I just want to mention, thank you indeed, Mr. Voss, for this work on delimiting the definition. I think it is very important. For instance, the delimitation to commercial platforms, which is now in your version very clear, I think it's an important step. But this will bring me to an issue related to Wikipedia and public space. I really think we're not in agreement whether this is a discussion about public space or not. And I don't mean it, I know this can be immediately rebuffed by saying, so you're saying creators don't care about public space. I'm not saying that, I know they do care. But I think for part of the actors in the discussion, this is a discussion about basically market issue, economies of content creation. And for part of the debate, it's an issue about their public sphere, their user rights. And I hear a lot of comments from, I talk here with creators in Poland, they say, really, this is not a debate for you. This is not for citizens. Just let us regulate our deal with platforms. And I say, of course, you should get a better deal with platforms. But I really think for some actors, this is a discussion about how we create a content circulation. And if we don't somehow solve this issue, if we don't agree what copyright is for, I think we'll continue to misunderstand each other. I think this will be a problem. And this is where Wikipedia comes in. I read this article in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung where it was said, you know, when the German automotive regulator puts a fine on Volkswagen, it's very strange for BMW officials to speak up with outrage. And the author compared this with Wikipedia speaking up on regulation that doesn't affect them. But that's the difference between market regulation, where indeed market actors work in their own partisan interest, and regulation of public sphere, where I understand Wikimedia community is simply speaking on behalf of public interest. And then you don't need to be directly affected as an entity by a regulation to be able to say something. And I don't want to judge this. I just mainly want to point that I think there's some fundamental lack of shared perspective yet. And maybe that's something we need to work more on.
Okay, thanks a lot, Alek. That was a kind of a Schlusswort, final statement, because indeed it's really important who speaks for the digital civic society, and as a result of this colloquium, which has been very respectful, I think, and shows that we all want good things, that maybe it will be tried to include a digital civic society into the decisions also and in the debates. And what I also have is that I think the point demonetization is also very important. Maybe that would be the subject of our next video colloquium. But not now, unfortunately. We don't have time. Everyone has to work, because all of us also has to work. So also what is an important point of today is do not ignore technical problems, and be aware of this. And my last question to you all is, if you had a wish for an ideal digital society, what would it look like? Your favorite ideal digital society where everything, where we don't have negotiation processes, we ignore all things, all steps. How would your vision be of a good, resilient, ideal digital society? Axel, Voss, please.
So spontaneously, I would say everyone, also in the digital world, should respect the right of others. This would be ideal for me.
Okay, and Bozhidar Bozhanov was Bulgarian. What would your wish and your ideal digital society be?
Open and transparent, because otherwise there are many risks that end up in these partisan and entrenched discussions because of lack of transparency and openness within the whole space.
Okay, thanks. And Alek Tarkowski from Poland.
I would say one that looks less or a lot less than a giant commercial online platform, and a lot more like Wikipedia, which you could clearly see is really my point of reference for a lot of thinking. I know there are challenges to it, but still it's because it's co-created, you know, because it's a commons. I think we need that.
Yes, awesome. I thank you a lot. Co-created good digital society from all civic people. That would be a great I thank you really a lot, and I'm looking forward to going on with the discussion, and we see that it's really easy to talk to each other. So let's go on with it. Thanks a lot.
Thank
in
you
all your countries. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.